Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Postman Visualizer webinar. This is one of the webinars that we are doing after quite a long while, and we wanted to bring to you the latest improvements that we have done in terms of the product and the ways you can use Postman. So before we get started, my name is Kaustav. I am part of the developer relations team in Postman, and it's my job to kind of explain all of these products to the community and bring that feedback back into the product. And in doing so, what we want to do today, specifically today, is kind of talk through what the data visualization thing in Postman is about. And it's still in beta. So we would like your feedback and kind of how you have been, as in how you think you can use the product and so on. First, kind of a brief introduction of Postman, just to tell you that where we have come over the last 5 years has been completely community driven. And today, Postman has over 8 million developers on the platform. So these are people who have signed up and use Postman, and you are among the people, I assume, who are in our that number. We are also used across 400,000 organizations worldwide to build over 250 million APIs. That's just to give you a hint of the scale of the community in Postman. And just a quick note for people who are clicking the raise hand, I'll just feel free to type your questions. We have got people waiting and they can answer you as well. So we wouldn't have come this far without the constant involvement from the community that we have. So we have an open issue queue on GitHub, which is the primary place where everyone files feature requests and bugs. And that's how Postman has grown all these days. Now, all of you know Postman as the API client. So you send responses, you send requests to API and you get the responses. Now, the truth, however, is that APIs were not meant to be or are not meant to be human readable. They are supposed to be machine-to-machine communication. It's application programming interface. You've got applications talking to each other. But as the world moved more towards APIs, and this is what we have seen the landscape change over the last 5 years, that APIs have started being consumed by more and more individuals in many business case scenarios. We have even seen e-commerce startups run their whole backends on APIs with just using Postman collections to trigger different workflows. So in that sense, we all deal with API responses day in, day out, but it does not really help a lot to understand what's happening under the hood. So this is what you kind of get with Postman when you send a request. So you look at the raw view under there. That's exactly how the server sends the data to Postman. So it's not formatted. It's the same thing that you would see if you have used curl and the data dump that you get back. So this is kind of just, I'd like to say it has got only one possibility, because you just see the exact way that the server has sent the data to you. Also, one small clarification: when I'm talking of APIs here, I'm talking of HTTP APIs, web APIs delivered over HTTP, not to be confused with kind of internal APIs or machine APIs. So that's the raw view. But then what Postman brought to the table was also the pretty view. So when Avinav, our founder, had started Postman, one of the main pain points was to consume APIs better, to actually have this interface where you can craft your request. We call this the request builder in Postman, and send the request, get the response, and be able to work with it. Over the years, we have enhanced how this pretty view looks. So we now have support for different data types. Postman can switch your pretty view depending on what data type it is. You can search within Postman as well, search within the response as well. You can collapse certain sections and so on. So that's kind of the pretty view's primary use, where we have just seen its use as an API client. And beyond that, the pretty view, probably not many of you have seen this because we don't really use it in our API use case, but we do have a pretty view which can render the HTML variant of the response. There are some security restrictions around loading external style sheets and JavaScript. But on the right-hand side, you see this is a Wikipedia page that is being rendered. But on the left-hand side of the screen, what you see is the preview being shown as the server responded with the data. So in this case, this is how it would look like if you use a HTML browser to look at your JSON data. Now, in all of this, the key part that is missing is we often take the data that we get from APIs. Let's say you're using Postman, you have got requests crafted, you have shared the collection with your team, and then you get some response back from an HTTP API. The truth is, to make better sense out of that data, we end up visualizing it. So the thing that you see on the screen is, sorry, just a moment. So the thing that you see on the screen is a screenshot from cdc.gov. So just to kind of bring home the point that these are different kinds of data. These might be the, HTTP APIs delivering JSON payload, but to make sense of the data, it has to be represented depending on the data type. You can use a map, you can use like a chart, you can as in use any bar graph or anything. So it depends on the type of data. So when we look at any kind of raw API response, it's kind of limiting till we manage to do something with it. And that is where Visualizer comes in. So we started this project quite a long time back. The requirements were pretty varied, starting from, hey, I have got this huge API response from legacy APIs and I want to focus on a specific part of the response. So how can I do that? How can can I just edit my response code live and show it somewhere? Then we had requests around, I keep on taking the API response, pasting it into Google Sheets and rendering a chart there to make more sense of that data. Can I skip that process and do it directly in Postman? So that's where we have built this visualizer feature. And for us, from Postman's perspective, this is enabling the whole ecosystem of developers and API consumers to work better with API responses right within the context of Postman. So everything that you see here are connected to how your API response was received. So this whole thing is scriptable. And another thing that we have realized working over time is we have been talking of Postman as an API development environment. But what we are really good at actually is the collaboration part. And in truth, it's the consumers of an API and the developers of an API who work hand in hand in real life to get something done, to get a product shipped, or to integrate an external third-party software. So in all of those, the consumer and the developer angle kind of comes very prominent. So from a consumer's perspective, what we wanted to do is take them beyond the pretty raw and preview modes. That what if we could take the same data and visualize it in a way that makes sense? So yeah, like why can't we just draw this chart right within Postman? And that, folks, is what the Postman Visualizer is about. To make more of your data, to make more from the exact API responses that you get. So you take an API response and you push it to some other service. That's fine too. You can do that with Postman. But what if you could just take a request and visualize it using the toolkit that you have already? If you are a JavaScript developer, if you have worked with any form of charting or data visualization libraries, bring them in. You want Chart.js, you want D3, you want any canvas-based rendering, you can do all of that. You want just to focus on maybe just like in this screenshot that you see, create a simple table, you can do that too. So it's kind of, the way I like to see it is, it's a canvas for you to paint on. It's a nested web view inside Postman, and we have got some APIs to specifically work with it. Oh, and thanks for everyone saying that you like it. I'm glad you already liked it. I haven't even shown you how it looks like. And I'm glad you like it from the slides. So, well, we are Postman. So the thing we do best is collaboration. So why not collaborate better? And to do that, the way we have implemented Visualizer is it's a script that is written right within your test scripts in Postman requests. So for those of you who are not aware of test scripts in Postman, they are JavaScript code written inside a request that is executed after a response is received. You can also write a pre-request script, which is just the tab that you see beside that, and that is executed before a request is sent. So combining pre-request scripts and tests, the benefit is it stays saved with the request. And once you save that request to a collection in Postman and you share that collection with someone, they get the same tests, they get the same scripts, and they can replicate the exact same environment in Postman. And you can also publish that collection for consumption across, like outside your team, for the rest of the world. And the screenshot that you see below is from explore.postman.com. We will send out all these resources after the webinar as well. But just take a look at explore.postman.com. And guess what? If you have a Postman account, you already have a public profile on Postman. So just sign into Postman, go to explore.postman.com. You can set your public profiles as well. And from there, you can also search, look for templates on the top. And templates are these collections that people can publish directly. Now, the reason I'm telling you all of this is visualizers are scripts written within that test or within pre-requests. Actually, would want it to be within tests. So they are shared along with the collection that you share with someone. So if you have published it and someone has imported it, they'll get to see the exact same visualization. And while you build that, since you can use Postman workspaces to share your collections with your teams, you can collaboratively build that visualization as well, collaboratively check it. Each time you run a request and each time you get a response, that visualization is rendered. And anyone who installs that template, installs that collection, also gets access to the same visualization features. So let me take you a bit through the consumer's side of things. That how does it look like from an API consumer's perspective? Now, a wee bit of disclaimer: you can be the API consumer and API developer here at the same time. From just to set the context here, if you are consuming an API, if you have sent a request and you have gotten a response, then you are the consumer of that. But if you are the one who's writing the collection, writing the visualization scripts in the collection, or you are the one who maintains this, let's say maintains an API, then I would like to call you as the developer. Now, honestly, I love the number 3. It's like it makes every list look so simple. So we spent a lot of time, me and my team, that how can we really simplify this whole experience for visualizers. So we realized that at the bare minimum, you can go to just click that new button on top. I'll give you a run through as well, but just click that new button on top of your Postman app. Click over to the templates tab, search for visualizers, and it's VISUALIZER or ZER. You can install any template that someone has published, and we do have quite a few of our community members who have already created visualizer templates. So just install it. Once you install a collection, you get the request as part of the collection. Click open the request, hit the send button. That is what I mean by trigger a request. And once you have sent the request and the response comes back, look in the response section area for the visualize tab. You will still see a beta tag on it. And that is also a key part of what we are doing here today. That visualizer is still in its early phases. We are still trying to understand what are the use cases that people have and what are the kind of requirements that we'd have in terms of data visualization. So these are simply just the 3 steps that you would use visualizers for. So yeah, I'll give you a long chat. So let's just take a look at something really concrete. And I have a request open here. So this is a template that was published by one of our community members. And if you are also among the person watching it, thank you so much for actually publishing this and actually using a real data on this. This has become one of my favorites, and I'm going to show it off here. Also, I just have a wrong environment selected, but never mind. So yeah, like I was saying, I have this collection installed. If you want to install this fresh, click this create new, switch over to the templates tab, search for visualizer. Yeah, so you see a bunch of options that we have here. We have got a table, we have got D3 heat map demos and everything. So feel free to check that out, check the other templates, but let me show you this in the meanwhile. You've got the preview, and well, no need to show you, but really this is how the server sent the response. And preview is, well, I didn't like it, but let's go back and take a look at the data. So I see that this is trading data, and okay, I've got timestamps. I see open, close, volume. I'm trying real hard to make sense of this data right now. Like, okay, this is a stock market data. I see it's for Snap, but what do I do with it? Guess what I can do with it is I have this script written here, and I haven't written this. Someone else has written this. I'm just showing it off. So I have this script written here with this gigantic amount of code. I'll explain how this code works, but here's the thing. I have it something as part of my test script. So this code was not written by me. This was written by a community member who had written this script and had shared it as a collection, and I installed it from the API network. So, well, all this said, that kind of a data kind of makes sense if I, let's say, have a time series representation. So how about this? Does this make sense now? Well, like I can see Snap rose this high. If any Snap shareholders out there, this was a good time. But I'm no stock market expert. I understand data visualization. I can tell you how to build that. So if you want to see your stock data inside Postman, you can actually do it now inside Postman. You don't have to copy this over to somewhere and visualize it there. And once you build it, it's there for you all the time. So yeah, this looks cool. And well, guess what? This interactivity is all coded by the person who has built this chart. So this whole area, this whole thing is kind of like a web page embedded that you can code. And I'll show you the code in a while, which kind of looks like just HTML that you're writing, right? With HTML, JavaScript, and all. Now, this means that each time, let's say, someone else installs, so if any of you are actually following along, yeah, sorry, I am not showing my face right now. It's night for me. I think my photo is really better. So this was a question that I only see the speaker's picture. I'm sorry. Yeah. All right, so if you're following along, click that send request and flip over to the visualize tab, and you can see how nicely it works. And kind of tie it back again, that you've got API consumers and API developers. So I showed you from the consumer's perspective, people who have used the collection, and then let's now look at what it looks like to build a visualization in Postman. So, well, 3 steps again. Like I said, we worked real hard to break it down to 3 steps, people. So first is if you are writing, if you're creating a data visualization in Postman, first you need to create a request. I'll again run you through the demo in a while, but it's the same as just you create a new tab, type in your URLs, the parameters, security credentials and everything, and save that to a collection. Then inside the test scripts, you write or you can use any other editor at this point. So use maybe Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, whichever editor you want. Or you can even use CodePen and actually try it out. So just write the HTML, CSS, JavaScript code that you would need for the visualization. And the third step, and this is where this feature becomes really, really mind-blowingly useful, is you can connect the API response data directly into the visualization. So you don't have to write, for those of you who build charts or dashboards, data dashboards and all. So yeah, number 3, binding the data API response data to the data visualization is simply a small command. I'm just trying to make it sound bigger than it is because it's really, really easy to create a visualization. I'll just show you how simple it is soon. So yeah, just to reiterate, create your first request to fetch data from the API. I'm just showing the Postman Echo service here. So we have a service called postman-echo.com, which you can use to loop back and test sample payloads as if you're emulating it with a real API. So then the next stage, we have the request, switch over to the your text editor and wherever you're writing your HTML, and just build out a simple template. We use handlebars. The template that you write in HTML for data visualization in Postman is interpreted as a handlebars template. Handlebars is a front-end templating or kind of a HTML templating engine. And if you have worked with any kind of backend servers which produce front-end code, or if you have worked with handlebars, you would know that handlebars has a very Postman-like feel. In fact, Postman has a very handlebars-like feel in representing variables. So handlebars in its representation of variables uses these double curly braces, the one that you see as temp. And the code that you see in that black area on the screen, it's just a HTML code which says, I want a paragraph, which says current temperature, double curly braces, temp, and then C. And the temp here is going to be a variable that I will bind from my data. So then once I have, let's say, created the template, I copy it over as a string into Postman. That's still a limitation. I'll run you through that in detail soon. So once you copy over the template string, pass it into this pm.visualizer.set function as the first argument, which I have as tmpl here. And the second argument can be the response data that you get from Postman. And if that data has a property, as in if the data object has a property called temp, in this case, handlebars will directly take it and use it to render the chart. So let's look at the hands-on part of it. Now, I have this nifty little template created for all you hackers out there. Just search for Visualizer DIY bar chart. We'll send out all these links as well. So if you go to this particular one and you scroll over to the tests tab, there's just one request in this collection. It's annotated, it's made there for you. So I'll just run you through what's exactly happening. So the first stage is I'm taking a response data, converting it into JSON. I'm assuming that I've got a JSON response, and I'm assigning it to a variable. Second is I'm creating an object where I'm extracting some of the parts of that API response, and I'm creating these labels and data. And the reason is I'm building a bar chart of two-dimensional data here. And this is kind of a bare minimum template. Consider this a better hello world for Visualizer in Postman. So you see what I have done is I have actually written my script somewhere else because, well, it's kind of clunky to write the whole thing here. We're still improving on that. But in the meanwhile, I have passed this whole string as a whole template as an ES6 string. And in there, I have got my scripts, which also update portions of the code. So it's like I am using handlebars to process my code. And I have got another function in here. I'll just come to that in a while. But then what's happening with the request? So far we know that I have used tests to get my JSON response, and I have given Postman a template string. I have got this pm.visualizer.set, and this is where the magic happens. It takes the template data that you have passed in here as a string, and you can pass it another object, which would be, in our case, the viz data, which would tie the data back. Now, in viz data, I was taking the data from the API response, which means when I sent this thing out, what's going to happen is I'm going to get a bunch of API responses. Oh, I forgot to show you one thing. So we have another kind of not so much talked feature of Postman. We call those dynamic variables. And this is really, really useful if you want to test with new data types or just create random data. This is an implementation of the Faker library in Postman. So we have random variables. Like there's a huge list of random variables. Look up the Postman documentation for dynamic variables. You will see the whole list. But what I'm doing here is I'm using a Postman echo service on the post endpoint. You can feel free to use anything you like, but I wanted to send some data and get that back. So I'm sending some labels and data thing here. So, well, it's what I want to do is I'm sending some random country codes and random int. I could have just hard coded this data, but I just wanted to be fancy. So what happens is if I send this thing again, notice these values change because each time Postman is going to generate a new set of values from me. So that's the beauty of random data, that you can actually see your data actually behave. All right. So another interesting thing to note is when I look at this whole response, right? Yeah, I was just drawing your attention to this small part. So what I was doing is I was just trying to make this a bit human readable for you. Because more often than not, what happens is when we as humans look at API responses, we try to find some meaning out of it. So maybe the whole response is not really meaningful for me. So I don't care about what headers I got back in this request. I don't care about if it had anything, any arguments or anything. I care about this data tag because I'm going to use that in my test script. I just scroll back. So I've got pm.response.json. I'm getting the response object. And in there, I'm assigning res.data.labels. Where is that coming from? Res is extracted from this whole response object. Res.data is this. Res.data.labels is an array of strings. So is res.data.data, which is an array of numbers. And that is what I am passing in here. So I have already tied this up with the script, passed it a very simple chart.js template. It has got some basic configuration options. So if you are using this template, feel free to hack on this, modify it, present it any way you want, use D3 or anything. But this is just to get you started. And I'll send it again, change the data, and look under the hood. So what just happened was chart.js rendered this whole thing inside it. So let's just have some more fun with random data. I just like seeing this change every time. Some more data. So it's kind of combining all of these, but well, play with this chart and see how it looks. But before I switch back, I wanted to show something simpler. So it's not always that we talk of data visualization or we talk of focusing on data and we mean that we want to, draw a pie chart or a bar chart. More often than not, we just need to focus on the right data type. So what if I had a table like this coming in? Let's say a name, email, something like that. Isn't this better seen like a table? And this is a very simple script. This is just using handlebars in here to do a loop on the data and render a HTML table. So essentially this piece of code is rendering all these lines. So just feel free to play around with it. You can also bubble up a very simple thing. So I'm just going to mess with this for a while. Let's say I don't want to do anything apart from, I'm just trying to show you how simple it can get. So I'm just going to keep this loop and I'm going to make this become paragraphs. So this is just to show that you can actually edit on these live. Never mind. I can just do name, and I want to do name hyphen email. And let's remove every redundant piece of information from there. Make it a very simple template. All right. Looks simpler. So if I hit send now, wham. That's people the simplest possible visualizer template that I just hacked together for you. So it's this simple. I'm just iterating. I'm passing this response object. I've expanded it this time to show it more clearly. This is the second argument where it goes as the data. So I'm taking the response. I know where I'm getting the response from. And this response, if you look at the pretty view, is has got .data.contacts, which is what I am looping here on. And this is a loop within handlebars. So Postman ties this up with handlebars. Yeah, slash table is not needed there. That was a beautiful catch. Thank you. Well, community-driven efforts. Always love that. So yeah, contacts is an array of objects. And each object has a key called name and email. That's my data structure here. So what I'm doing is I'm looping on response.data.contacts. I'm getting my response from pm.response.json. I've got simple paragraph and I've got name and email variables. Now I look here, this is, trust me, at least to me, this is way more prettier than what I'm seeing here to make sense out of it. But well, you can make a better chart of it. And you don't want all of that to stay. I can just, well, undo my changes, send that back again, and I have my table back. And the reason I was getting also excited is it's available for all our plans. Head over to this page called getpostman.com/API visualizer, API-visualizer, or you can follow us on Twitter as well. We keep on tweeting quite a lot about everything. So that's kind of the end from me. And I'm going to switch over to the questions for a while. So let's see what kind of questions that I still have left. Yeah, so I have a first question from Dinar. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, sorry. Hello, is it possible to integrate with Elasticsearch? Okay, I'm gonna answer this live. So Dinar, you can integrate with Elasticsearch. So if you have got an Elasticsearch API, I mean, yeah, if you are connected to an Elasticsearch API, you can take that data and do whatever you want with it in the context of the visualization code. I hope that answers it, but you will still have to write your code there. Okay, second question I have from Pawan. I will just take maybe 3 or 4 more questions. Okay, what happens to the visual graph in case there is an error in the chart functions I write? Will it give me any error message back or empty screen? Thank you, Pawan. I actually forgot to mention this. That what happens in case something goes wrong. And what happens is, if you right click on this visualizer area, you get this inspect visualization. I forgot to mention that. And this opens up a proper DevTools thing. And if you have some trouble in here, so let's say I want my body to have background purple. It's just like using your Chrome's DevTools right there. So Postman is written as an Electron application, and this is where you see the value for even having an Electron application that you can do all of these. Now, let's say what happened if inside here I had a script blob and I do console.log, looks familiar, and say I am from the future. Because honestly, I look at Visualizer and that's the feeling I have. Right, so nothing on screen, but let's look here. There you go. I've got something from the future. So you can, well, use that debugger right there. Another, on that note, if you're not familiar with Postman's console, Postman has an inbuilt console, like right in the bottom here, bottom left. If you open that thing up, you've got a bunch of new improvements which has happened there. You can go and actually look at all the requests in more detail. So try to put a few console.log, console.warn, something in your test scripts head over to the console and look at it. But the reason I showed that console is that's, as of now, in at least the beta form of Visualizer, slightly different from, as in it's a different dev tools set from the console that you see here. So they two are not the same. If you're debugging anything with Visualizer and something in the chart goes wrong, you would see it come up here if you have any syntax errors in that dev tools. And that's how you would work with it. Okay. Can you show me an example for XML response? I don't have an example installed, but if we have a bunch of uh, examples which use XML responses. So if you look in the templates, search for SOAP or XML, you will see a bunch of templates. So you can just, again, go to templates here. We actually have one right here. So feel free to play with these. These probably don't have a visualization added, but you can hack on it and add on your own. Just a quick point there, if you are more comfortable working with JavaScript objects, the Postman sandbox ships with a library called XML to JSON. If you look at our documentation, you can use that to convert from XML response to a JavaScript object. Head over to community.getpostman.com and feel free to ask your questions there as well for the ones that I'm not able to answer. So that's it from me. I would like to leave you with the URL here again. Head over to getpostman.com/API visualizer. This is what you see. You don't have to register for the webinar again because this was about this webinar, but you go there and at the bottom you see we've got a bunch of examples. So each of these examples are similar to what I have shown you already. If you click the Run in Postman button, it's going to import that collection right into Postman for you. That's it, people. Thank you, everyone.